Hello, Mr. Daniel Kurtzer. It's a
Hello,
pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you here with us at the radio of the IDC. How is your Hebrew?
Lo nora.
Lo nora. But I think both of us prefer to have the interview in English right now. As a very experienced diplomat, and I know that the United States also faced some challenges in the world when it comes to different places, different areas in the world. What would you recommend to Israel to do in this arena, in public diplomacy?
Well, I think there are two parallel and related tracks that need to be looked at. The first is substantive and the second is technical. The substantive track has to do with what I would call product. If your policy, if your approach, if what the world sees is positive, then the technical issue of getting out the message becomes much easier. We once had a conversation when I was an ambassador. We had a meeting of our chiefs of mission with, the conversation was with our senior official for public diplomacy, and she was actually criticizing us for not doing a good job in marketing American policy. And she had come from the world of business, and I said to her, you know, first give me product. If you give me good policy, I can do a better job in marketing it. So I think the first issue really goes back to policy. Not that the world is always going to agree with Israel, but strong, assertive, rational policies are much easier to sell than those that are based on ideology and emotion. The techniques are changing so fast now with Twitter and Facebook and the social networks and communications capabilities. You know, just here you see this beautiful radio station, state of the art, but you've got to keep it state of the art if you want to remain relevant. And I think most foreign ministries and most information arms of government are 2 generations behind in terms of what they know and what they think about. There's a famous story during the post-Iran elections where the State Department was smart enough to tell the Twitter management not to take down Twitter for 24 hours for some kind of refurbishing. And that was good, but it only suggests the beginning of what has to be a very long process. How do you reach people, and how do you address people who only communicate now through Facebook or through their iPods and iTouches and all the rest? So it's a big challenge technically as well.
I was watching the panel dealing with the US-Israel relations, debating whether these relations are still special. Do you think there is a change? Do you think these relations are still special?
Well, as a professor, if you ask me to grade the relations today, they're still an A. There's no reason not to give it a good mark. Public opinion in the United States is still supportive. The Congress is still supportive. The press understands much of the Israeli argumentation. But also as a professor, where you want to look ahead, and certainly as a former diplomat you want to look ahead, I would not ignore some of the potential trouble spots. We talked earlier about the college campuses. This is the next generation. These are, you know, young people who are affected now by what they're understanding, and then they carry those views through life.
How do you perceive the differences as an ambassador, as a diplomat, as someone who was sent by a certain government? How do you perceive, on the one hand, your job as a diplomat and being Daniel Kurtzer, a person with his own opinion, his own points of view, his own ideology?
Well, there were a couple of principles by which I lived my life during the 30 years that I spent as a diplomat. Number one is that no one knew my political views. But I felt it was important that what I did at work not be confused with how I might vote or which party I might support. Secondly, one of the great advantages of working within the diplomatic establishment is that you have an opportunity to fight for your views. And I never felt in the 29 plus years that I worked in the State Department that I didn't have the opportunity. I always felt that there was a chance for me to make my views known, to fight as hard as I could. But then principle number 3 was you then carry out the policy the best you can. You may continue to discuss the changes that you'd like to see because policy is, after all, fluid. It doesn't just start on one day and end on another day.
Being Jewish as an ambassador in Israel, a challenge or an advantage?
Well, I tried to turn it into an advantage. It certainly was a challenge. The first time I met Israeli diplomats 30 years ago, I saw them go off into a corner and huddle, and I heard the words, Mishelanu? You know, is he one of us? And the answer is yes. I'm Jewish and quite committed, and I've never tried to hide it. We are, I don't like labels, but we try to be affirmative Jews as well. We keep kosher, and I try to observe Shabbats, and you know, it's not easy to do in the diplomatic service. So in Israel, there's always a little bit of confusion of what that means when a foreign diplomat comes and looks like an Israeli but acts like an American. And that's what I do. I'm an American and I represent the United States. But it was wonderful to be here as a committed Jew and as a committed Zionist Jew who is as proud about what Israel does as anyone else. But I do reflect American values and American policies and tried to make persuasive cases for what the United States was arguing to do. So challenge and opportunity, and we tried to make the most of it.
Today you are at Princeton. How do you think Israel is perceived by the students? We always say that we have a problem, an image problem on campus. How do you think Israel is perceived?
I think Israel does have an image problem on many campuses. Princeton is a little bit of an exception because it's not as politicized a campus as some others. But even on Princeton, questions are raised. Now there's a book out by Walton Mearsheimer called The Israel Lobby. It's been out for a couple of years, and people are asking questions about whether or not the pro-Israel lobby in the United States is responsible for some of the things that have gotten the United States engaged in that are not that popular. How quickly and how well Israel responds to issues such as the Goldstone report. Many people at Princeton came to me right after the Goldstone report and said, doesn't Israel always investigate itself? And I said, yes, they do. And so the question was, well, why aren't they doing it now? Instead, they're fighting against Goldstone instead of saying, look, let's take a look at what happened and we'll give you an objective report. Now, I know that's a subject of debate here now between the Army and the government and other factors, but that does have an impact in the United States. And here's a country which does a very good job of investigating itself, but on the Goldstone report is very much behind the curve, has lost a lot of ground.
So if I understand correctly, you recommend Israel to investigate?
The answer is yes, and the reason the answer is yes is because this is a very open society that wants to fix its problems and to learn its lessons. Just the other day I saw in the newspaper that 2 senior officers were being disciplined for a particular action taken during the war. That doesn't happen all over the world. So if there are now more serious systemic allegations, then yes, there should be an investigation, and the country will do the right thing. Now, after that investigation, if there still is an anti-Israel effort, then it's a lot easier to stop it, because one can point to the Israeli investigation and say, a democratic country with a free judicial system has done its own investigation. It's harder to do now on other than political grounds, because there hasn't been an Israeli effort to take a look at what happened.
Mr. Daniel Kurtzer, it was a pleasure having you here with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.